Good evening. That was not the tidiest start ever to the show. I accidentally had that on loop and it wouldn't turn off when I was telling it to. Anyway, and it played back a little bit too fast. But anyway, not to worry. Welcome to another episode of Sunday Night Live. I have no idea, by the way, just so you know, I have no idea exactly what episode number we're up to. I kind of stopped counting a while back because I had lost count, so I don't know. I know that I've been doing it every Sunday for maybe about 4 or 5 years, 6 years maybe. So we must be at some kind of milestone soon, I would think, but I'm not really sure. Maybe one of you guys can go through the playlist and figure out exactly how many shows we've done and then kind of let me know when we're going to hit a particular milestone. That would be a great help if somebody would be so kind as to volunteer to do that task. That would be great. So there we go. Yes, it is very hot in Scotland at the moment, as I said. Currently, right now, it is like 65, nearly 66 degrees, and that's just the outside temperature. In here right now, with the lights on and all my gear running, it is probably about 72, 73 just in this room. Now, we are under an amber warning for extreme heat, which does not get issued very often here in the UK. Maybe once in a great while it'll happen. But one thing that has never been issued before is a red warning for extreme heat. And there are parts of England where, in fact, there's a large section of England that is under a red warning where they are likely to see temperatures well in excess of 100 degrees, possibly as much as 104 or 105. Which is a temperature that the UK has never got to before. They started doing alerts and warnings for extreme heat in 2019, because in 2019, the UK hit 38.1 degrees Celsius, which is close to 100 degrees. And that was the hottest temperature in I think in history, certainly since records began. So the fact that we are currently under kind of red and amber warnings for temperatures up to as much as 40 to 43 degrees Celsius, which is well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, says something. So if it's going to be like 103, 104 degrees outside, in here it's going to be probably about 108, 109 degrees because, I have gear on all the time. So it's going to be pretty challenging over the next couple of days because this warning is for Monday and Tuesday, and then we are set to have a whole bunch of incredibly violent and spectacular thunderstorms. And then temperatures should drop down to kind of normal for this time of year, which would be, late 70s, early 80s degrees maybe. So enough talk about the weather, but that's kind of where we are at the moment. It's kind of unprecedented. It's incredible. I mean, sitting here right now, it is actually incredibly hot. It's almost unbearable to be sat here. But I'm going to still do the show because come rain, come shine, come fall or foul, or, if I really am too sick to do anything, I don't do a show. But otherwise, I am here every Sunday, 6 p.m. Central Time. And I'm fairly confident that even if I were dead, somebody would wheel out my body and park it in this chair and stick the camera on. But that's maybe a little bit OTT. But anyway, let's go see who's here. And I think it was, let me see, who was here first? It was Billy Morgan who was in the door first, followed by Rich Cresswell and Alps Media and Just Bob and Music to Motion, my good friend Mike, and Kyle Trajuziak. And Bob's New York is here as well. And who else is here? You guys are all my regulars. Low Ends is here, which is fantastic. Don Oliver is here, which is great. Paul Morgan is here. Burlap Studios is here. Who says it's going to be 109 where I live this Tuesday, so they say. Wow, that is incredibly hot. Harley Bob is here as well, which is awesome. And Waveform Laboratory says, wow, that is hot. Nonetheless, it is truck month in the USA. Damn the torpedoes. Very cool. Let's see who else is in the house tonight. Ronald Figura is here, which is great. And Kingston Dread over in the Caribbean is here, which is fantastic. So we got most of the United States, and we got some overseas contingents as well. And Secret Squirrel has just joined us as well, which is great. All right, so we're going to start with some questions that Bob actually sent me, or one question that's kind of in a little chain of questions that he messaged me via Facebook Messenger, because it was going to take up several posts in the chat. He didn't want to kind of block up the chat, I suspect. Peter Bricks is here. Awesome. Welcome, Peter. I'm glad you're here. So let's get to Bob's question. And whilst we're dealing with Bob's question, please get your questions in the chat and we'll get this show underway. You guys are pretty good at asking some seriously challenging questions, and I do not wish that to stop. So please do continue asking all those burning questions. I'm going to kind of leave heat kind of related metaphors out of tonight's show because it's so hot in here. So yeah, any of your questions that have been uppermost in your minds, to rephrase, get them in the chat and we'll get this show going, which would be fantastic. All right, so let's get to Bob's question, which is actually an interesting one. He says it's an odd one, but I think it's actually interesting, and I can see that there is some logic to it, which is great. So he says, why on piano does the right hand play chords and the melody, and with guitar, chords and melody are played with the left hand on the fingerboard? In theory, shouldn't guitar therefore be called left-handed because you strum with your left hand and play chords and melodies with your right hand? Wouldn't that make more sense? And if not, what are the mechanics behind that? Well, they're both completely different instruments, so kind of one is not related to the other at all, and they're both played in completely different manners. But I see your point, but I think the reason why, a guitarist playing the chords and melody, doing the kind of fingering of chords and melodies with the left hand on the fingerboard, being regarded as right-handed rather than left-handed, I think it's because the actual action of the sound being made against the string is with the other hand, which is doing the plucking or the strumming, because technically the guitar is it's a rhythm instrument, but it's also a string instrument, and it also has a plucking element to it, so there is a percussive element to it, so it has lots of different things going on. But the main action on the strings takes place with either the fingers plucking the chord or with the plectrum striking the plucking the strings or striking the strings with the plectrum. So most of the work is actually done with the right hand. So, which is why most guitar players whose right hand is the dominant side for them would play the guitar in this manner. And it's probably the more predominant way of playing the guitar. There are plenty of exceptions, Jimi Hendrix being one, who, if you've ever seen Jimi Hendrix do other things other than playing his guitar, he writes left-handed as well. So his left hand is definitely his dominant side, or was his dominant side. So although this hand seems to be the fingers seem to be doing a lot more work, and you're using fewer fingers if you're using a plectrum with your other hand, in Jimi Hendrix's case, that therefore this is kind of left-handed and this is kind of right-handed, because, you know, this is kind of the dominant hand. Now, I am one of those unique-ish people who is actually fully ambidextrous. My left hand is as strong as my right hand. Both hands are equally strong. So this means I can play piano and I can play bass guitar, which most of you know I'm a bass guitarist. I'm also an upright bass player, which is where I kind of started. But I also have a guitar, in its case just over there, a nice sort of hollow body Ibanez guitar. And I have that right-handed as well. And I write with my left hand. When I play cricket, I bowl with my left hand. I bat left-handed. When I'm playing baseball, I pitch left-handed, and I also bat left-handed. So there's a lot about what I do that is left leading, left dominating. So you could be mistaken into thinking that I am left-handed until you see me play bass or you see me play guitar. And that's because my being left-handed is a choice. It's not, one side is just stronger than the other, or one side of my brain, it dominates more than the other. If you're very right-brained, then you're going to be more dominant with your left side, and vice versa. In my case, I can actually throw, and I can actually play tennis or baseball with my other hand as well as I can with my left. I prefer to be left. So I think when we're talking about guitar and which way round it is and why that's different to piano, there are different instruments that have a different kind of dominance, I suppose you could think about it. When you play trumpet, this hand operates the valves, which, if you're very left strong, you're very left leading, then you have to teach yourself to be able to move your fingers nice and independently with this hand and hold the instrument with this hand and operate the fourth valve slide with your ring finger, or some people do it with their second finger. So brass instruments are just designed that way. And, woodwind instruments are, again, like the piano, woodwind instruments are an equalizing instrument. They are neither right-handed nor left-handed. They are equal-handed. So I suppose there is a difference, again, there. But I don't think there's necessary kind of a bias, that you can only play piano one way, or you can only... I think with playing piano, you actually have to be... You have to have some degree of hand independence. So there's a little bit of a fudgy answer, but I hope it kind of does address the question, Bob, because it's a good one. It's all about mechanics and the mechanics of making music. And to be honest, I don't think it matters whether you are left leading or right leading, just so long as you are able to make good music on whatever your instrument of choice is. I play several instruments. And that probably actually stems a little bit from my ambidexterity. But that's a really good question. I like it. I like starting with a good question. Waveform Laboratory says, I have to reset my device block size in Studio One between tracking and mixing due to latency. Any ideas on this? Solutions, fixes? I'm running a Mac Mini quad core. Actually, most people do that just anyway, and most people have done that for years in different DAWs. Now, here's the thing with Studio One, and a lot of people misunderstand this, and I've actually been talking with one of my friends who is in Persona Software. He's, kind of in the development side of things. He's also in QA. And we were talking a little bit about the low latency monitoring path that was introduced in Studio One 3.5. And a lot of people misunderstand how it works and what it is for. What it is designed for is it's designed to put your playback channels into one path and your recording channel in a completely different path. The reason being is you can get low latency when you're recording using the low latency monitoring system. Now, when you are mixing, you no longer need it. It is irrelevant. It's no longer required. So that's when you can start playing about with your device block size. But if you're recording, use the low latency monitoring path. And you can set that up in Studio One options or on a Mac, which is what you are. It'll be Studio One preferences, audio, and then go into the processing tab. And you can set up the low latency monitoring path there. You can set it to either low, which is effectively turning it off, or maximum, which is where it is fully engaged to its highest capacity. So if you're recording, it's a good idea to use that. If you're recording using something like Ampere, then you want to use the green Z, which is the native low latency monitoring path, which is basically you're monitoring through the second path of the software of Studio One. If, however, you have one of these devices like the Studio 1824C or the Studio 192 that supports hardware monitoring, you can use the blue Z, and you can turn off that software low latency path, and you can be directly monitoring directly off your interface, and that gives you practically zero latency, 0 milliseconds of latency. It may be like 1 or 2 milliseconds of latency, which really you're not going to hear, because the human ear really can only detect anything faster, anything slower than like 10 milliseconds. Most people do not detect latency faster than 10 milliseconds, which to some people you think 10 milliseconds, that's a lot. It really isn't. 10 milliseconds is not a lot of time at all. And if you think that, then your brain has to then not only receive the information to your ears, it then has to interpret that information and then send commands to your fingers, to your hands, to your voice to then produce sound. Your human body is going to provide latency on top of that. Your own latency. Everybody has that. So, the green Z, can you explain how I set that up? I don't know what that is. Yes, we can go there. We can definitely go there. So I can show you now. It might cut my audio if I do that, but I will give it a try because of the way I'm using my interface. So let's go to Studio One. Actually, you can't see my pretty little face, so let's put the camera back on. I always forget to turn that back on. All right, now, actually, Kingston has the opposite question. How do you set up the Blue Z? You can set up the Blue Z if your interface supports it. If your interface does not support it, does not support direct monitoring, you're out of luck. You won't be able to use it. It just won't happen for you. All right, so on a PC, you go Studio One Options. On a Mac, you go Studio One Preferences. And then you go to Audio Setup and Processing. Here it is. So in this Audio Device tab, this is what you had before Studio One 3.5. You had your device block size. And this is what everybody did. We did this for years. If you were recording, you wanted the lowest latency possible, so you would move this to a lower block size, right? But then when you're mixing, you don't need that. So you actually want the computer to work a little bit harder because you want your plugins to not overload. So you'd set it really high. And a lot of us, we did that for years. And you know what? Some people still do that because they just prefer to do that. And so here are your input and output latencies for me at 256 on this computer. Now, your computer mileage will vary depending upon what your CPU and your RAM and everything else will handle. I'm using 44.1 kilohertz. I've used that for decades. I don't envisage ever changing at all. So I have 10 milliseconds and my input, and my output latency is less than that. So I am below, on my output latency, I'm below the threshold for human latency detection. So if I go over to this processing tab here, I have this set to minimal, which basically means it's switched off. Why do I have it switched off? I have it switched off because my system is fast enough to not need it. And as you can see here, I have the audio round trip here. Standard, it's 24.6 milliseconds, which is 1085 samples. But in the bluesy low latency path, it's less than 0. So that's the equivalent of you know, not having it switched on. So I can change this. I can change this to low, and still that stays the same. I'm watching my audio because I might lose it by fiddling with this. And I can set this to medium. Now, watch what's happened now. Now I've got the green Z here. Now, this is the native low latency monitoring path instead of the hardware monitoring. So that's what the green Z is. Green Z is monitoring through the low latency monitoring path inside Studio One instead of monitoring through the hardware path. And that's specifically for recording, which is what this is all about, folks. This is all about recording. Mixing, you don't need the low latency monitoring path. Forget it. Turn it off. When you're recording, use this. Okay? Now, you will see here that at a medium setting, the process block size, which is different to the actual device block size because they are separate paths, it's 512 samples, so it's a little bit bigger. And so the standard values are 48 for audio and 52 for instrument. And these are basically slashed in half with the low latency path. And, you know, that's, for some people, they'll go, oh, 24 milliseconds. That's uncomfortably, you know, it's not actually that bad. I'll be honest. Now, let me see what happens if I slap that up to high. Those values are not changing, but these ones do. This is the standard path because now we're talking about 1024. And if I whack this up to maximum, 152 milliseconds, and look at that. The low latency path is fixed at 24 milliseconds with the green Z. Because that's what the low latency monitoring path symbol is. It's the green Z. It's blue for hardware, green for the software low latency monitoring path. And you see that this is checked here. All right. Now I can turn this off. And as you can see, my audio now goes down to less than 0, but my instrument path is still going through the green Z. Now, when it says instrument, it doesn't mean guitars, basses, trumpets, saxophones. It means virtual instruments. So hope you folks understand that. Mike says, I believe I can detect 10 milliseconds when I'm playing things with fast transients like piano or some percussion, but with strings and such. No. And that would be true of most people. Most people, it's about 10 milliseconds. You have a few people that can hear faster than that, but most people don't, which is, you know, kind of, you know, I get people occasionally reporting things where they'll say, oh, I'm getting 5 milliseconds of latency. And it's just like, I really should be getting 0. It's just like, no, you cannot get 0 in software. You cannot get 0 milliseconds of latency in software. It's impossible. Because it has to be converted from audio into digital, and then it has to go through your system. It has to go through the DAW. It has to go through your CPU. It has to go through your RAM, and then it has to get converted back out to audio and then come out of your speakers. That takes time. Now, the faster your core speeds are, and the more RAM you have, and the faster those RAM sticks operate at, that's going to affect how fast that latency is. For sure, it will have an impact. There's no doubt about that. I don't have any direct bench test values to give you as to what kind of system will perform better than others. You know, what will perform great on one system that is supposedly really, you know, a $20,000 PC or a $40,000 Mac Ultra, for example. Studio One may not perform very well for you on one of those computers, and it's nothing to do with the software. It's to do with how the software interacts with your system. That's the problem, and there's not really any fixing that. But Studio One might work really great on a much cheaper, much lower spec computer, and vice versa. You might get the other way around as well. You know, computers are never the same, whether it's a Mac or a PC. You know, you can buy one Mac and then let's go out and buy exactly the same spec Mac, and Studio One will work better on one than the other. Who knows why? It's a mystery, and mysteries are okay. So there you go. Can you make a macro to toggle between record and mix with the green Z? Don't know. I don't think you can, but I don't actually know for certain. Keith Jagwit says, if you suffer from low latency, I recommend less fiber. I prefer more carbs, but that's another issue. But that's still pretty funny. Cal says, my quickly done unofficial count is 494 videos on my channel. Well, that's great. But are you referring to Sunday Night Live playbacks? You know, when the show is finished, it gets created into a replay video. Is that what you're referring to, Kyle? Because if that's true, then we are incredibly close to 500, and that should be acknowledged in a few shows' time. So can you, check that is the case, please, Kyle? Confirm, rather. Waveform says, when you set processing to anything other than minimum, it doubles the latency. Isn't it better just to set it up in the device block size? I don't get this. Depends what you're doing. Are you recording or are you mixing? If you're recording, then this is going to help you out. This processing is going to help you out. So if you're using Ampere or something like that, you want to have this box checked and use the green Z. The reason being, Ampere does not play back on the blue Z. It doesn't. The reason being is because it has in itself a latency greater than 3 milliseconds. There is a knowledge base article that everybody, I recommend you go and read several times through, to be honest, because this knowledge base article, which I'm now going to go and try and find, I'm just going to go back to this view for a second whilst I try and find that knowledge base article. And once I've found it, we'll be good. Let's see. See if I can find this in our knowledge base. See if I can find it. If I can find this in the knowledge base, we are golden. So let's go Studio 5. Here we go. Found it. Found it. All right, so let's go back over here again. All right, so here is the article, and you can find it by going to presonus.com, and then when you're in presonus.com, you go to hang on, let me just go back and show you how you get to it. So presonus.com, go support, go knowledge base, go Studio 5, and then just type in here dropout. DROPOUT, and let me do that again because it didn't work. If I just type in dropout and don't press enter, the article comes up, and here it is. And I'm going to put this in the chat so you guys can go and grab the direct link. There we go. Done. Yeah, that's all videos. Okay, so I've got nearly 500 videos on my channel in total. That's awesome. All right, so I recommend you guys read this article very, very carefully. Does the latency management replace the original audio engine? No. It's an extension to the original audio engine, but it does not replace it. With Studio One 5, the user has control over multiple latency levels, standard latency, audio processing, independent dropout protection to avoid audio dropouts, and low latency monitoring for virtual instruments. With dropout protection set to minimum and low, set to minimum. This needs editing. I will do that tomorrow. With dropout protection set to minimum and low latency monitoring for instruments unchecked, the audio engine works nearly the same as before, but with added stability. Does it reduce CPU load in my songs? Basically, yes. While overall CPU load and likelihood of audio dropouts are significantly reduced, the total amount of data that needs to be processed is still the same. It's just better distributed. So whilst it's possible to load more plugins for virtual instruments, CPU and processing are still set by the available CPU performance, etc. Do I need to adjust the audio processing setup for every new song? They are global, so they're globally stored. So how do I know the difference between hardware, that's DSP monitoring, and native software monitoring? Not every device will support DSP monitoring. Some do, some don't. The Studio series of interfaces like the 1824C, the 192, they do. The Series 3 mixers, they do. Some of the other interfaces that we make, like the AudioBox series, they don't. They are software low latency only, no DSP. So in Studio One Mixer, a small Z at the bottom of the output channel fader indicates availability and type of monitoring. Blue stands for low latency hardware monitoring and green for low latency software monitoring. The mode is set in audio processing preferences pane. Use native low latency monitoring instead of onboard DSP. Low latency monitoring still needs to be activated by clicking the Z on the respective output channels. Alright, so read through this article and this answers most of your questions. Read this through a few times is what I would recommend. Thanks for the explanations. I have some more experimentation to do. Yep, no problem. Alright, so that covers that. But yeah, read that article. I recommend everybody do so and read it several times through, because there's some important things here to bear in mind. Alright, let's go see what else we have. Ronald Figueroa says, I have a question posted further back in the chat. I will go check for that, Ronald. If I don't find it, then please repost it. I need to make sure... Oh, there we go. There we go. Found it. Found it. How do I turn layers into tracks so I can export the tracks as stems? Doing some multiple takes and I want to make them all available for review, or can I export the layers? You should be able to export the layers, but we can test that theory. So I'm going to put that back to minimum, which is how I like it, and make sure all of that is set to normal, or I could just hit cancel and everything gets set to normal. Anyway, all right, let's go back over here. I don't normally do takes to layers, but when I do, it's very, very cool. It's a very cool feature. Let me just go over here and press this button here, and we'll stick in an audio thingy here. And I have to remember how you open the record panel. There's a shortcut for it, and I can't remember what it is. Additional views. Where's the record panel? There it is. Shift, Alt, and R. There it is. So you can do takes to layers by checking this option here. So what I can do is, everybody should know how to do this, is I can set up a loop zone. Let's say just 2 bars. There we go. We'll set up a little loop here, and then you can, let's just record a couple of loops here. So when this is recording, this will go over to take 2, take 2 is here, and now we're going to go over to take 3, and now we're on take 3, and then we're going to go over to take 4, and here's take 4, and then we're going to stop. Alright, now, there's all my unpacked takes. I don't know why they've got roads written there. That's weird. But anyway, we won't worry ourselves about that too terribly much. There's all my takes, and you can promote these with this active layer arrow here. Now, let's say I want to render these. I can unpack layer to track. So I can take all of these. Let's say I like all of these takes, but I need somebody else to review them. I can try holding down Shift and then go unpack selected layers to tracks. Boing, and there you go. And then I can close this panel, and there's all my takes. And here's take 4, and then we're going to stop. Now we're going to go over 2. All right, there we go. So that's how you do it. You right-click the takes. Let's just open this panel again. You right-click your take, and you go unpack layer to track. And then what you can do is you can then hide all your takes, and then you're just left with just your tracks, and then you can export these. All right, so I hope that that answers that question. That's a good one. Like it. You guys are asking some great questions. So there we go. Let's go down and see if there are other questions. Thank you for that. YouTube filter doesn't work well. I have to count manually by hand. No, you don't have to do that. You can just go into the playlist. There is a playlist called Sunday Night Live, and you can just see how many videos are in that playlist. You don't have to count like manually going through my entire 500 video collection. There is a Personas meetup in Brazil right now. Should we all drop in for a hello after the show? You guys certainly can. I am going to try and get some sleep because it's going to be extremely hot over the next 2 days, and I'm not envisaging that I'm going to get a whole lot of sleep these next 2 days. There we go. Thanks, Rich, for reposting Ronald's question. House of Latin is here, which I believe is a new subscriber. Welcome! Welcome to my channel. Welcome to my show. I'm glad you are here. Let me take a break. There we go. I've been following the channel because of your song structure theory talks. Would be super interesting to watch you make a simple pop tune live in Studio One. I could certainly do something like that. I think I did that a while back for maybe about 3 or 4 Sunday Night Lives. We came up with a piece called, and you guys actually suggested the title for it. We called it Cassiopeia Files, and then I mixed it and I mastered it, and I haven't released it yet. I don't know why I haven't released it yet, but it's mostly because it's like really, really short. I don't think I actually released it for that reason, but I have actually done that. But certainly maybe it's something we could revisit for sure. We could see your screen and hear your detailed reasoning behind what chords could be a series. Yeah, for sure. We could do it over a series of a few shows, like we did last time, and we could do something different from scratch. Now, what we did last time was I got you guys to suggest kind of what instruments we should use. Once I started with a basic kind of set of chord changes. And I think you guys decided what key it should be in and what the tempo should be. And once we had decided what key it was going to be in and what tempo was going to be in, then I started working with some drum loops and that kind of thing. And you guys chose which one you preferred. And then we kind of went from there. And largely, I kind of did what you guys told me to do. You guys were my producer. So that could be fun. Kyle says, via the playlist, you have done 200 Sunday Night Live videos so far, not including today's. So does that mean that this one is 201? In which case, we've missed the 200 milestone. Damn it! Damn it! But, wow, 200 Sunday Night Lives. And there are people here who have been here since episode 1 of Sunday Night Live. Rich says, I don't know about anyone else, but I'm enjoying a nice hot curry and a cup of coffee. I don't know how hot and humid it is down there in the Midlands, but here in Scotland, it's pretty humid and it's pretty hot tonight. I'm just going to actually check what the temperature is right now. And it is 18 degrees Celsius at the moment. And I need to go find my converter again because my maths sucks. Because I'm not very good at this. Let's see. Let's look up what that is going to be. So we'll do C to F. And there's the formula. But we'll put in 18. And it's 65, which is what I said earlier. So the temperature has not really changed much. Get some rest, but I'll launch a Zoom afterwards. Cool. Okay, well, if I've still got tea left in my mug, I'll join you for a Zoom shortly. For sure. But we'll see. I don't want to spend too long under the lights, to be honest. Alright, so there we go. Let's go back over to this screen here. We're back in the lounge, as we'd call that here. Lounge? Sitting area. Hangout area. I don't know what to call this area yet. I haven't... You know, we're 200 shows in, and I've still... I mean, Jonny has his classroom and his lounge. I don't really have kind of like a name for anything that we do here. It's pretty simple. We just have like this view here, and then I show my Studio One screen, and we have an end card. And that's it. It's pretty simple. Yeah, nice and toasty. Yeah, you're not kidding. But it is like nearly 1 o'clock in the morning, so 18 degrees at 1 o'clock in the morning is a little bit mental. Call it the crib. Well, I'm Scottish. I'm not really kind of... I'm not really in the hood, man. Gotta say. John says 18 degrees Celsius would be extremely cold in my part. Yeah, I think it might, actually. Burlap says, regarding church modes, he has a question incoming. Yeah, Mike, we'll have to work out some Scottish slang equivalents of the crib, what that might be. My phone shows 247 Sunday Night Live shows updated today. Oh, really? Is that right? Wow. If that's correct, then we are coming up on show number 250. So, that being the case, this will be 247 then, if it says updated today. Which means next week will be 248, and then the week after that will be 49. So we've got 4 shows to get to 250. So I think it'd be worth acknowledging and marking that 250th show. Leave the nouns to the audience perspective. For sure. Yeah, I'm Scottish and not ghetto. I'm not from Glasgow. My wife is from Glasgow, but I'm not from Glasgow. And she's actually from kind of one of the kind of deeper, darker areas of Glasgow. All right, Burlap has his question. Let me go back up to his first part. He says, regarding church modes. So I'm assuming he's talking about Gregorian modes. Things like Dorian and that kind of stuff. They each have a target note. What makes them so? For example, the 6 is one of those hanging notes for the Dorian mode. But the 4 is the target note for the Lydian mode. Okay. So, Dorian mode. Let's get this straight and do it a little bit, so that everybody understands how this works a bit better. Let's get over to piano. because I was on Fender Road Sound. All right, so modes in its simplest form. Now, I could go into a lot more detail, and I could take you into a lot more depth, but when we say Gregorian modes, there are two types of Gregorian modes. There are the minor modes and the major modes. So for the most part, when we say modes and we're saying Dorian and Lydian and Mixolydian and ouch, that's not a mode, but anyway, and Aeolian and Ionian and all of those are modes of the major scale. Why do we say the major scale? Because they all relate to the C major scale. Okay, so this is the Ionian mode. It's also known as the C major scale. You then get Dorian, which starts on the second degree. It's the same scale, it's just D to D. And then you get Phrygian, which sounds kind of vaguely kind of Middle Eastern. Then you get Lydian. Then you get Mixolydian. Wait. Then you get Aeolian. And then you get Locrian. And then you're back to the Ionian again. So they are the modes of the major scale. And they all have kind of a Greek-ish kind of name to them. Just kind of, you've got to give it a descriptor. You can't say the C major scale starting on D, because that just sounds weird, right? And, you know, you can lead to a lot more confusion if you do that. So when we are saying D Dorian, what do we mean? We mean the Dorian scale starting on D, which is actually its kind of root, if you like. But Dorian mode can start on any note, providing it has the correct composition. So if I was to take the Ionian mode for a minute, the major scale, but start that on a different step. So if I start that on D, so we've got to have that major third in there, and the leading tone. So it sounds the same, although it starts and ends on a different point. So same with E Ionian, which is the E major scale. So it is with any of the other modes. So, you know, Mixolydian in its root form starts on G. But it can also start up here. On A flat. Basically, it is a major scale with the flat 7, which is why it's often referred to as the dominant scale. Because it's you know, it has that flat 7 rather than the major 7. All right, so I can start that at any point and it still makes Lydian mode. Okay, so your modes can start anywhere, providing they have the correct composition, the correct makeup, the correct intervals. You know, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 for example, being one particular scale. But you might have a different one here. Like here we've got tone, 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 semitone, tone, tone, semitone. And that's the Lydian mode. So providing your scale has that composition, but starting on a different starting point, it will still sound like the Lydian scale. As long as it has that kind of sound to it. And basically, in this configuration, starting on F, which is the Lydian root, is basically the F major scale with the raised 4, the sharp 4. It's also known as kind of like the sharp 11 scale, the major 7 sharp 11 scale. The reason being is because that's the chord that it fits, is like a major 7 with the sharp 11. So if you put, there's the sharp 11 right there. Which again kind of gives it a little bit of a kind of a Spanish-y, Mediterranean-y kind of sound to it. So I hope that helps answer that question. Good one. Good music theory question. I like those. Music theory questions are good fun. All right, so I hope that answers that. So Rich says, we'd call a house a gaff. Yes, down south you would, particularly certain parts of England, you'd definitely call it a gaff. Here, kind of lowlands of Scotland, it would be hus, just because that's the pronunciation that we have of it. And there is, of course, endless debate about aluminium. Rich is correct. There is an I there. It is a Latin word, aluminium. It's not aluminum. It's aluminium. Aluminium is a chemical element with the symbol AI. That is correct. Okay, Ronald has a good one here. He says 2 tetrachords, whole step, half step, separated by a whole. And then he's kind of adding bits here. Whole step. I'm not quite sure what he's saying here. 2 tetrachords, whole step, half step, separated by a whole step. So, whole step, half step. Yeah, the C major scale is made up of 2 tetrachords. Dead right. And then that's exactly right. The C major scale is made up of 2 tetrachords. But here's and if you really kind of want to get into creating some scales that have a little bit of a unique kind of thing going on, take a look into something called Hexachordal Combinatoriality. What the heck is that? That's going to be above most people's headspace. I mean, not for the fact that it's got that many letters in it, which it does, obviously, but when we're talking about what's a hexachord? Hexachord has 6 notes in it, or 6 steps, 6 tones. It's like tone rows. So you take a one hexachord, and then you take another hexachord, take one set of 6 notes from one scale, take another set of 6 notes from another scale, and you combine them to make a new scale. And that's essentially what hexachordal combinatoriality is. And it's just another way to create a row of tones, which is what a tone row is. And basically you use these notes to create your composition. So forget scales, forget chords, forget chord progressions. You have these notes, and those notes are the notes you use to create your piece of music. And hexachordal combinatoriality or tone row music or 12-tone systems, they are essentially modal music in its broadest sense. Why? Because you're using a scale to derive everything. You're using a scale to derive your harmony and your melody. And you're not really bothering about chords. You're just taking notes from that scale and playing them together to create a chord. That's all you're doing. And then you're building melody using those same notes. And modal music works pretty much in exactly the same way. So people like Scriabin, Webern, Berg, Schoenberg, and people like that of the mid-20th century, early and mid-20th century, they kind of created this idea. From which we kind of think, hey, that's just atonal music. It makes no sense whatsoever. Well, actually, it mostly does. It mostly makes a lot of sense. It's like learning a very complex language. Like, for example, most Western people, when they go to places like Southern and Central Africa, will encounter languages that have phonetic sounds that they have never heard before because they are not part of Western phonetic language, right? So whether we're speaking French, German, Spanish, Italian, or English, you know, we just don't encounter these particular sounds. But, you know, you go to Southern and Central Africa where their native indigenous languages have clicks in the phonetic sounds of how they actually make the words in their language. And it's totally weird when you're exposed to it for the first time. You don't get it. It's just like, what on earth? But the more you kind of start to listen to it more and you understand what those clicks mean and what they denote, then you start to understand it. So in the same way, it's like if you are a hardcore metalhead and you listen to John Coltrane for the first time, you're not going to get it. You're not going to understand it. Or if you listen to Charlie Parker for the first time, you're not going to get it. You're not going to understand it. But the more you listen to it and the more you kind of begin to understand what is going on and what is being communicated by the musicians, you get it. And you begin to understand it. And then you begin to explore that language for yourself. Which is why I recommend everybody should explore different musical languages. So if you're a rocker, go and absorb yourself in some classical music. Go and absorb yourself in some jazz. Go and listen to Coltrane. Go and listen to Miles Davis. Go and listen to Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. Go and listen to Louis Armstrong and you know, work out those things that those guys were doing back then. Because all of those things are foundational to the music that you love and the music that you play. You know, rock and roll sits on the shoulders of what came before it, which was jazz and rhythm and blues. And before that, you get, you know, kind of proto-gospel music. And before that, you get, you know, North African and Caribbean music forms that form kind of like the bare bones basics of blues, which comes from work and field songs. So I hope everybody understands what I'm kind of ranting about here. But there you go. That was an exceptionally long answer to a really good question. Keith says, remember kids, hexachordal combo, what do you call it? No, will be on next Sunday's quiz. Yes, next Sunday I will ask everybody what hexachordal combinatorial... I can't even say it. Hexachordal combinatoriality is. You can look it up in Webster's Music Dictionary, I believe. I think you will find it there because that's kind of where I was taught about it when I was studying musicology. So let's see. We are over time. That's why hexadecimal is what it is. 6 alpha and 6 alpha plus decimal letters. Correct. All right. Ever seen that movie? The Gods Must Be Crazy. All right, folks. We're going to call it there. But Mike, if you're going to do a Zoom call afterwards, get the link in the chat now, and then everybody can go over to it. How do you spell it? That's a great question, and I'm just going to ask Google how you spell it, because I can't remember. Hexachord. Here we go. Hexachordal combinatoriality. And I found a wiki link to it. Now, we all know what wiki is. Hexachordal combinatoriality is a concept in post-tonal theory that describes the combination of hexachords, often used in reference to the music of the Second Viennese School. Berg, Webern, those kind of guys. We're all doing this. So here is the spelling. Here is the spelling of it. Go have fun looking this up, and you'll find that there are actually some YouTube videos on the subject. But as with YouTube videos, not everybody is going to actually be a genuine bona fide musicologist and give you the best definition and the best practical demonstration of how it works. But it's essentially it's a 12-tone technique as I've described, where you're taking half of one 12-tone note row and you're combining it with a completely different one. And it's certainly something that is worth experimenting with. If you want to try and create something that just sounds weird, and you never know, there might be a scenario where weird music is what is required. So science fiction shows feature whole tone scales, diminished whole tone scales, and hexachords, and combining hexachords from different tone rows to create their music. You'll find that in some of the Star Trek incidental music from the Star Trek films. You'll find it in John Williams, some of John Williams's music for the Star Wars films, but not exclusively, because he was much more of a tonal composer rather than atonal or 12-note row composer. But he did do some of it a little bit. Anyway, all right, so Mike, get your show. He's done it. The show is, his after show party is linked there. If you want to go join the after show, then please do. And I will see you guys on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified over at the Home Studio Trainer YouTube channel on Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central. Be there or be a hexachord. And I'll see you then, folks. Good night. Bye.